The night was cold and quiet as Emily Carter drove through the winding roads towards Maplewood Station. It had been years since she'd last thought of this place, but the letter she'd received, a faded photo of her younger brother, Alex, standing at the station long after his supposed death, had brought it all flooding back. Her brother had vanished 10 years ago after the infamous derailment that had closed Maplewood Station for good. Now, a single picture threatened to tear apart everything she thought she knew. The old abandoned station loomed ahead, its skeletal structure a shadow against the full moon. Emily parked and took a deep breath before stepping out of her car. The air had an unsettling chill, and every sound seemed amplified in the eerie silence. The gravel crunched beneath her boots as she approached the entrance, a rusty sign overhead reading, "Maplewood Station, closed since 1995. Inside it was dark and decrepit, time having clearly taken its toll. Emily switched on her flashlight and carefully made her way through the waiting area, scanning every corner, every flicker of movement. A faint noise from deeper within the building caught her attention. She turned sharply, her flashlight illuminating a gaunt figure in a security uniform. "You must be Emily," the man said, his voice raspy but oddly calm. He stepped into the light. "Nathan Ross, I'm the night guard around here." Emily studied him, noting his weary eyes, and the way his shoulders sagged as if carrying a great burden. "How did you know my name?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's hard not to know the stories when you've worked here as long as I have," Nathan replied, turning and motioning for her to follow him. "Besides, you're not the first one to come here looking for answers." The old train conductor turned night guard led her through the dusty station, recounting stories of ghostly sightings and inexplicable disappearances. There was something in his tone, a weight behind his words that suggested these were more than just rumors. He paused in front of a locked door, reaching into his pocket to produce an ancient brass key. "You sure you want to see this?" he asked, his eyes boring into hers. Emily swallowed and nodded. Nathan opened the door, revealing a stairway descending into darkness. They made their way down, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. At the bottom, they found themselves on a hidden platform, the air growing colder with every step. Emily swept her flashlight across the space, the beam catching old benches, rusted railings, and, inexplicably, freshly scratched markings on the walls. Then she saw it. A train, still as death, its cars partially obscured in the darkness. It looked as if it hadn't moved since the derailment. And yet, she could hear something, a low hum, almost like whispers, emanating from within. "This is where they kept them," Nathan said softly, gesturing towards the train. Emily's heart pounded as she walked closer, her fingers grazing the cold metal of the door. She pushed it open, and immediately the smell hit her. Something like decay, but tinged with a strange metallic scent. The inside of the car was filled with old seats, torn and dusty, but among them were piles of old documents and folders. Emily picked one up, opening it to reveal photographs and diagrams, notes on passengers, medical terms she couldn't quite understand. It all clicked into place. The derailment wasn't an accident. These people had been experimented on. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the car, extinguishing her flashlight. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming towards her. She fumbled for her phone, the screen barely lighting the car as she saw them. Ghostly figures, their forms flickering, transparent. Among them was Alex. "Emily," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of ghostly murmurs. She felt tears welling up, her knees threatening to give way. "Alex?" she choked out, stepping towards him. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his eyes filled with both fear and urgency. "They're trying to come back. The experiments. They opened a portal." Nathan stepped forward, his face ashen. "The portal's still here," he said. "We have to close it." Emily looked from her brother to Nathan. "If we close it, what happens to you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alex smiled sadly. "We'll be free. All of us." Emily's heart shattered. The thought of losing him again was unbearable, but she knew what she had to do. She nodded, her tears flowing freely. Tell me what to do." Together, she and Nathan worked quickly, following Alex's instructions to destroy the remnants of the experiments. The machines, the documents, the ghostly apparitions gathered around them, their eyes filled with gratitude. As Emily set fire to the last of the documents, a blinding light filled the tunnel, and she heard her brother's voice one last time. "I love you, Em. Be safe." And then, silence. When the light faded, the platform was empty. The train was gone, the air still and lifeless. Emily collapsed to her knees, her sobs echoing through the tunnel. Nathan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he whispered. Emily nodded, though the emptiness in her heart remained. She stood, wiping her eyes, and together they climbed back up to the station. The night was just as cold as before, but somehow the air felt lighter. As they stepped outside, Emily looked back at the station one last time. The truth was out, the cover-up, the experiments, the portal. But the cost had been high. She had lost her brother again, but at least now he was at peace. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady. And with that, they walked away, leaving the haunted past of Maplewood Station behind. Story 2. Jake Mitchell was not one for ghost stories. As an electrician working night shifts at the abandoned Meridian Central Station, he'd heard plenty of tales about the place. People talked about strange noises, flickering lights, and even the ghost of a conductor that supposedly haunted the station. But Jake was a skeptic. He believed in faulty wiring, not phantoms. It was late one night when Jake received an assignment to repair the electrical system in one of the station's old wings. The power outages had been persistent, and they needed someone to figure out what was causing the strange electrical disturbances. Meridian Central had been closed since the mysterious train crash of 1922, a tragedy that claimed the lives of everyone aboard. The station was now a ghost of its former self, dark and desolate, its grand halls echoing with the memories of a forgotten past. Jake arrived at the station just before midnight, his toolbox in hand. The air was damp and heavy, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. He tried to shake off the unease as he made his way through the sprawling corridors. As he worked, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see Clara Monroe, a local history professor who was obsessed with Meridian Central's tragic history. "Jake, wait up," Clara called, her voice breathless. Jake sighed, turning to face her. He'd met Clara a few times before. She was always digging into the station's past, chasing after ghost stories and urban legends. "What are you doing here, Clara?" he asked, irritation evident in his voice. "This isn't exactly a place for sightseeing." I know, Clara said, catching her breath. "But I need to be here tonight. It's the anniversary of the crash, and I think I might be able to get some real evidence, if the stories are true." Jake shook his head, but there was no real anger behind it. Clara was persistent, and he knew she wouldn't leave, so he allowed her to tag along. As they walked through the dimly lit station, Clara explained the legend of the phantom conductor, a spectral figure that appeared at exactly 3:15 a.m., the same time the crash had occurred. "It's just a story," Jake muttered, focusing on the flickering lights above. "The only thing haunting this place is outdated wiring." But Clara wasn't listening. She was staring at her watch, her eyes wide. "Jake, it's almost 3:15. Can we at least check the platform?" He sighed but reluctantly followed her to the platform. The vast space was empty, the silence only broken by the distant hum of the city's nightlife. The two stood there for a moment, the cold air biting at their skin. And then, just as the second hand ticked past 3:15, a train whistle echoed through the station. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He turned to Clara, who was staring out at the tracks, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. The tracks had been out of service for decades. There was no way a train could be coming. Suddenly, a light appeared at the far end of the platform, growing brighter with each passing second. Jake squinted, and there he saw it. A figure in an old-fashioned conductor's uniform, holding a lantern that flickered with an otherworldly glow. The phantom conductor. "You see that, right?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his skepticism crumbling in the face of the impossible. The conductor stood still for a moment, his lantern casting long shadows across the platform. Then slowly, he turned and began to walk, his steps echoing in the stillness. He moved towards an old boarded-up section of the station, and without thinking, Jake and Clara followed. The conductor led them to a door they had never noticed before, hidden behind layers of grime and forgotten memories. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow passage that led to a forgotten part of the station. Dust hung thick in the air as they descended into the darkness, the glow from the lantern the only source of light. At the end of the passage, they found a small room filled with old passenger logs and artifacts from the early 1900s. Clara's eyes scanned the records, her fingers trembling as she pulled out a faded manifest. Her breath caught in her throat. Jake, my great-grandfather. He was on that train. Jake stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Before he could respond, the phantom conductor turned to face them, his hollow eyes locking onto Clara's. He raised his lantern, and suddenly, the room was filled with a vision, the day of the crash. They saw the train, the passengers, the panic, and they saw the truth. The crash had been no accident. It was the result of a failed experiment, an attempt to manipulate time to create a loop that had gone horribly wrong. The vision faded, and the conductor's form seemed to waver as if he were struggling to remain. Clara looked at Jake, her eyes filled with determination. We have to help him. We have to break the loop. Jake nodded, his fear replaced by a sense of purpose. Together, they worked to uncover the remnants of the failed experiment. Old machinery hidden beneath the station, wires and gears that had long since rusted. The phantom conductor watched, his lantern flickering as if urging them on. Time was running out. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Clara's hands shook as she pulled the final lever, and with a deafening crack, the machinery sparked to life, then died, the energy dissipating into the ether. The lantern's light flared one last time before fading, and the phantom conductor looked at them, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely audible as he began to fade, the weight of a century-old tragedy lifting from his shoulders. The room fell silent, the oppressive chill lifting. Jake and Clara stood there, the gravity of what they had just done settling in. They had broken the loop, freed the conductor, and perhaps all the souls trapped by the failed experiment. Clara looked at Jake, her eyes glistening with tears. He can rest now, she said softly. Jake nodded, a strange sense of peace washing over him. He placed a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder, and together they made their way back up to the main station. The night was still dark, but the air felt different, lighter, as if the ghosts of Meridian Central had finally found their peace. As they stepped out into the night, Clara looked back at the station, a smile playing on her lips. Maybe there's more to these ghost stories than we thought. Jake chuckled, shaking his head. Maybe. Or maybe we just made one hell of a story ourselves. And with that, they walked away, leaving the haunted echoes of Meridian Central behind. Story 3. Liam O'Connor was no stranger to danger. As an urban explorer documenting abandoned places for his YouTube channel, he had seen his fair share of eerie and derelict locations. But something about Willow Creek Station felt different. It wasn't just the crumbling walls or the overgrown tracks. It was the stories. The tales of people who went missing here in the 1970s, never to be seen again. Locals called it cursed, but Liam wasn't one to believe in curses. He was here for the thrill, the views, and the subscribers. It was Halloween night, and Liam had decided this was the perfect time to visit the station. He wasn't alone, though. His partner, Mia Alvarez, a paranormal investigator, had reluctantly agreed to join him. Mia was cautious, always insisting on preparation and protection rituals before entering any supposedly haunted place. Unlike Liam, she believed in the supernatural, and Willow Creek Station had always given her an uneasy feeling. They arrived just before midnight, the station looming ahead like a dark specter against the starless sky. Liam set up his camera, the red recording light blinking in the darkness. "All right, guys, we're here at Willow Creek Station," he announced, his voice echoing slightly. "It's Halloween, and we're about to see if there's any truth to the stories about this place." Mia stood beside him, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Just remember, Liam, we're not alone here. If we feel anything off, we leave." Liam gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Mia. It's just an old station. Nothing's gonna happen." They made their way inside, the wooden floorboards creaking beneath their feet. The air was thick, as if the building itself was holding its breath. They moved through the main hall, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing old ticket booths and benches covered in dust. It wasn't long before they encountered someone unexpected, an elderly woman, her frail figure illuminated by the flashlight's beam. "What are you two doing here?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam and Mia exchanged a glance, both startled. We're just exploring," Liam said, lowering his flashlight. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer, her face lined with age and worry. "My name is Evelyn Brooks. I used to work here a long time ago. You shouldn't be here. The shadows, they took them, the ones who disappeared." Mia's eyes widened and she took a step back. "The shadows? What do you mean?" Evelyn's gaze shifted to the dark corners of the station. "They move in the dark. They whisper to you, lure you in. Once they take you, you're gone. Please, leave while you still can." Liam tried to brush off the unease that crept up his spine. "Look, we appreciate the warning, but we're just here to document the place. We'll be careful." Evelyn shook her head, her eyes filled with a sadness that made Mia's stomach turn. "Careful won't save you." Before they could respond, the old woman turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Liam sighed, turning back to his camera. "Well, that was weird," he said, trying to keep his tone light. But Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a terrible mistake. As they continued deeper into the station, the temperature seemed to drop. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to move just out of the corner of their eyes. Mia stopped suddenly, her breath visible in the cold air. "Liam, did you hear that?" Liam paused, listening. Faint whispers seemed to echo through the station, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. He swallowed, his bravado faltering. "It's probably just the wind," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Shadowy figures began to appear, moving along the walls, darting from corner to corner. Mia grabbed Liam's arm, her voice trembling. "Liam, we need to go, now." But Liam was already transfixed, his eyes locked on a dark shape that seemed to be watching them from the far end of the hall. He lifted his camera, the lens focusing on the figure. Through the viewfinder, he saw it, a mass of darkness, shifting and writhing, almost as if it were alive. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the station, like a door slamming shut. Liam and Mia jumped, their flashlights flickering. The shadows seemed to grow, reaching out towards them. Panic set in, and they turned to run, but the way back was blocked by darkness. "This way," a familiar voice called. They turned to see Evelyn standing by a narrow doorway, her hand outstretched. Without thinking, they ran towards her, the shadows closing in behind them. Evelyn led them down a narrow staircase, into a hidden chamber beneath the station. The walls were covered in strange, ancient symbols, etched deep into the stone. Evelyn turned to them, her eyes filled with urgency. These symbols, they were meant to seal the entities away. The station was built on sacred land, and they disturbed it. That's why the disappearances happened. The shadows are trying to break free. Mia nodded, her fear giving way to determination. "What do we do? How do we stop them?" Evelyn's face softened, a hint of sorrow in her eyes. "You have to finish what was started, but it will require a sacrifice." Before they could react, the shadows poured into the chamber, their forms twisting and writhing. Evelyn stepped forward, raising her hands. "Go! Seal them!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The shadows converged on her, their dark forms enveloping her as she screamed. Liam and Mia turned to the symbols, frantically trying to decipher their meaning. Mia's hands trembled as she traced the lines, her voice barely a whisper as she recited the words inscribed there. The chamber shook, the air filled with an unearthly wail as the shadows fought against the binding force of the symbols. With a final desperate push, Liam and Mia completed the ritual. The symbols glowed brightly, and the shadows let out a deafening scream before being pulled back, sealed once more within the stone walls. The light faded, and the chamber fell silent. Liam and Mia collapsed to the ground, their bodies trembling from exhaustion. The chamber was empty now, the oppressive darkness gone. But as they looked at each other, they knew something had changed. A mark, faint but unmistakable, had appeared on their skin, a reminder of what they had faced and the bond they now shared with Willow Creek Station. Mia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Liam. "We're linked to this place now," she whispered. Liam nodded, a heavy sense of understanding settling over him. "We stopped them, but we'll never be free of it." They helped each other to their feet, making their way back up the staircase and out of the station. The night was still and quiet, the stars hidden behind a thick veil of clouds. As they stepped outside, Liam looked back at the station, its silhouette dark against the horizon. "Maybe some places are abandoned for a reason," he said, his voice barely audible. Mia took his hand, her fingers cold but steady. "Let's just hope we did enough." And with that they walked away, leaving the Station of Shadows behind, but forever marked by the darkness they had faced. Story 4. Samuel Reed was a man haunted by his past. A former detective turned private investigator, he had spent years chasing ghosts. One ghost in particular, his missing fiancée, Emily. She had vanished without a trace years ago, and the case had never been solved. It had consumed him, driven him from his career, and now he was a man obsessed, following any lead, no matter how outlandish. So when he received a cryptic tip about Emily being seen at Duskfall Station, he couldn't ignore it. The station was abandoned, long forgotten by the world, except for those who knew the legend of the Midnight Express, a ghost train that appeared only at duskfall. Passengers who boarded it were never seen again. Samuel didn't believe in ghost stories, but the chance that Emily could still be alive was enough to bring him here. The station was decrepit, a relic of another era, its tracks overgrown and its structure crumbling. Samuel arrived just after midnight, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the platform. He wasn't alone. Olivia Harper, a librarian with a passion for unsolved mysteries, had offered to help. She had always been fascinated by the Midnight Express legend, and when she heard about Samuel's search, she couldn't stay away. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. She adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning the darkness. Samuel nodded, his jaw set. "If there's any chance Emily is here, I have to take it." They moved through the station, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and an unnatural chill seemed to hang over the place. As they approached the platform, they noticed a figure sitting on one of the benches, an old man, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "You two shouldn't be here," the man said without looking up, his voice raspy. "The Midnight Express takes what it wants." Samuel frowned, stepping closer. "Who are you?" The man lifted his head, his eyes hollow and tired. "Name's Harold Whitman. I was on that train once. Got off before it was too late, but I've been paying the price ever since." He lifted a trembling hand, revealing skin that looked far too aged for a man who couldn't be more than 60. "It makes you old. Takes your time. Your life. You don't want any part of it." Olivia shivered, a sense of dread washing over her. "But you survived," she said. "How?" Harold gave a bitter laugh. "Survived, yes. Escaped, maybe. But I'm still tied to it. And now so are you." Before they could ask more, the distant sound of a train whistle echoed through the night. Samuel's heart pounded. He turned to the tracks, his eyes widening as a light appeared in the distance, growing brighter. The Midnight Express was coming. The train emerged from the darkness, its old-fashioned cars gleaming under the moonlight. It came to a stop at the platform, the doors creaking open. Without hesitation, Samuel stepped forward, his eyes scanning the interior. He had to find Emily. He turned to Olivia. "Stay here. If anything happens, get out." Olivia shook her head. "No way. I'm not leaving you." But before they could argue, Harold spoke again. "Once you're on, there's no guarantee you'll get off. Remember that." Samuel ignored him, stepping onto the train. Olivia followed, her heart pounding in her chest. The doors closed behind them with a heavy clang, and the train lurched forward, the station disappearing into the night. Inside, the train was both familiar and alien. The seats were worn, the lights flickering, but there was something else, something unsettling. Samuel moved through the cars, his eyes darting from side to side. The air was thick, the walls seemed to pulse, as if the train itself were alive. Then he saw her, Emily, sitting at the far end of the car, her eyes wide with fear. "Samuel?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Samuel rushed to her, his heart aching. He knelt beside her, his hand on her cheek. "Emily, I've been looking for you for so long. We have to get out of here." Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. This train, it travels between worlds. If we don't get off before it leaves this dimension, we'll be lost forever." Samuel's mind raced. He looked around, the car shifting, the walls seeming to close in. How do we stop it? From the platform, Olivia could see the train starting to shimmer, its edges blurring as if it were fading from reality. Panic surged through her. She ran along the platform, her eyes locking onto a control box near the tracks. She had to try something, anything. She pulled at the lever, the gears inside grinding, and the train jolted, the lights flickering wildly. Inside, Samuel felt the train lurch, the floor beneath him trembling. He grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her to her feet. "Come on, we have to go." They moved through the cars, the train groaning in protest. The windows showed glimpses of other places, twisted landscapes, cities bathed in darkness, endless voids. The air grew colder, the whispers of lost souls echoing around them. At the door, Samuel struggled to pry it open, his muscles straining. Olivia's voice came from outside, shouting for them. With one final effort, the door burst open, and Samuel pulled Emily out onto the platform. They stumbled, collapsing onto the ground as the Midnight Express let out a final haunting whistle before fading away, disappearing into the night. The station was silent once more, the air still and heavy. Samuel held Emily close, his breath ragged. He looked around, but Harold was gone. In his place, they found a small, yellowed note. Samuel picked it up, his eyes scanning the shaky handwriting. "The train is part of something bigger. Beware the ones who control it." Samuel folded the note, his eyes meeting Olivia's. "This isn't over," he said, his voice filled with determination. Olivia nodded, her gaze shifting to Emily, who looked fragile but alive. "We got you back. That's what matters." They helped each other to their feet, the three of them making their way out of the station. The night was quiet, the stars obscured by clouds. As they walked away, Samuel looked back at the platform, the shadows deep and endless. "The Midnight Express might be gone," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But whatever's behind it, we'll find them." And with that, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving Duskfall Station behind, but knowing their journey was far from over. Story 5. Ryan Blake had always been fascinated by the mysterious and the unexplained. As the host of the Midnight Hour, a late-night radio show dedicated to urban legends and unsolved mysteries, he thrived on the strange stories that callers shared. But tonight, he was about to experience something that went beyond even his wildest theories. Old Town Station had been abandoned since 1987, after a catastrophic signal failure led to a deadly train collision. The station had since become infamous for ghostly voices heard over its old PA system, and Ryan couldn't resist the temptation to explore it for his show. He wasn't going alone. Tara Lynn, his tech-savvy partner, had agreed to join him. Tara had a knack for hacking into old systems, and Ryan knew she was the best person to have by his side for this adventure. They arrived at Old Town Station just before midnight. The place was desolate, overgrown with weeds, its structure slowly being reclaimed by nature. Ryan set up his recording equipment, his voice carrying a mix of excitement and nervousness. Welcome back, listeners. Tonight we're at Old Town Station, the site of the infamous 1987 signal failure. Rumor has it, the voices of those lost can still be heard over the PA system. Let's see if there's any truth to that. Tara rolled her eyes, though a smile tugged at her lips. You really love the drama, don't you? Ryan grinned. It's what the listeners want, Tara. Besides, there's got to be something to all these stories, right? They made their way into the station, their flashlights casting long shadows against the cracked walls. The air was thick, and the silence felt almost oppressive. Ryan moved towards the old PA system, his fingers brushing against the dusty controls. Suddenly, a crackle of static echoed through the empty station, and a voice broke through. Hello? Can anyone hear me? Ryan and Tara froze, exchanging a wide-eyed glance. The voice was faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. This is Marcus Quinn, the voice continued, desperation clear in his tone. I'm trapped. I need help. Please, if you can hear me, don't leave. Tara moved closer, her brow furrowed. Who the hell is Marcus Quinn? Ryan shook his head, his heart pounding. I don't know, but if someone's in trouble, we can't just ignore it. Tara nodded, her tech instincts kicking in. She pulled out her laptop, connecting it to the old PA system. Let me see if I can access the station's logs. Maybe we can figure out where this is coming from. As Tara worked, Ryan spoke into his microphone. Marcus, if you can hear us, we're here. Where are you? The PA crackled again, Marcus's voice faint and almost drowned out by static. I'm in between. The experiment. It went wrong. The signal. It opened something. I'm stuck. Tara's eyes widened as she scrolled through the logs. Ryan, look at this, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The day of the accident, they were testing some kind of experimental signal technology. It looks like they were trying to create a new communication channel, but something went wrong. Ryan's stomach twisted. You think that's what caused the accident? Tara nodded. And it might be why Marcus is wherever he is. If that experiment opened a rift, it could have trapped him between dimensions. Ryan took a deep breath, the weight of the situation settling over him. So, how do we help him? Marcus's voice crackled through the PA once more. The control room. You need to shut it down. It's the only way. Please, hurry. They moved quickly, following Marcus's directions through the dark, maze-like corridors of the station. The air grew colder, and strange echoes seemed to follow them, whispers that sent shivers down their spines. Finally, they reached a door marked Control Room. Tara hacked the old lock, the door creaking open to reveal a room filled with ancient equipment, cables snaking across the floor. In the center of the room stood a console, its screen flickering with strange symbols. Tara rushed to it, her fingers flying over the keys. I think I can shut it down, but it's not going to be easy. The system's unstable. Ryan watched the screen, the symbols shifting and changing. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. We don't have much time, Tara. Whatever's happening, it's getting worse. Tara nodded, her focus unbroken. Suddenly, the console sparked, the lights flickering wildly. The room seemed to twist around them, the walls warping as if reality itself were unraveling. Ryan grabbed Tara's arm, his voice urgent. Tara, we need to end this now. Marcus's voice echoed through the PA, filled with fear. If you don't stabilize the signal, you'll be trapped too. Please don't leave me here. Tara's eyes narrowed, her hands steady as she entered the final sequence. The screen flashed, a high-pitched whine filling the room. The equipment around them began to power down, the lights dimming. The whispers faded, replaced by a heavy silence. Ryan held his breath, his eyes locked on Tara. Did it work? The console went dark, and for a moment, there was nothing but stillness. Then, a faint voice came through the PA, no longer distorted. "Thank you. You did it." Ryan and Tara exchanged a look of relief. They had done it. They had saved Marcus. But as they turned to leave, a strange feeling washed over Ryan. A sense of finality, as if something had changed. "Ryan," Tara said softly, pointing to the console. A small red light was still blinking, and a message appeared on the screen. "Rift sealed. No further access possible." Ryan swallowed, his heart heavy. "We saved him, but he's still out there, isn't he?" Tara nodded, her eyes glistening. "We sealed the rift, but Marcus, he's somewhere else now. Not here, but not gone either." They made their way back through the station, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. As they stepped out into the cold night air, Ryan looked back at the dark silhouette of Old Town Station. The echoes of the past still lingered, but they had done what they could. "The midnight hour just got a lot more real," Ryan said, his voice shaky but determined. "We may not have all the answers, but at least we gave Marcus a chance." Tara gave him a small smile, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Maybe that's all we can ever do, give people a chance." Ryan nodded, his eyes on the station. "Let's get out of here. We have a story to tell." And with that they walked away, leaving Old Town Station behind, its secrets still buried but its ghosts a little quieter.